Hello and Yali Madat, everyone. My name is Parviz Laka and I'm back to provide you with this week's Jamaati institutional update. And as you can see, I'm here at the Ismaili Centre. Now, looking around this room, I, for one, cannot wait until it is filled with the hustle and bustle, the laughter and chat, the smell of masala chai and the crunch of biscuits. But until then, it is my pleasure to be able to stand here and bring you the Ismaili Centre virtually. Now, I really hope that you enjoyed last Saturday's programme when our President Itmadi Noshad Jivraj provided us with an important update. He informed us that the safety of the Jamaat is paramount. And that's why, whilst sadly you can't be here in person, we can bring a little bit of the Ismaili Centre to you virtually every week. Now, we also heard a very inspiring ITREB talk by Dr. Shiraz Kabani, so thank you to them both. So this evening, I'll begin by highlighting some of the exciting events that will be taking place in the week ahead. So now, looking ahead at the week. Well, we start tomorrow with the Golden Club session that will continue to take place at 12:30 p.m. And the talk this time will be delivered by the STEP Academic Director, Rizwan Lalani, and he'll be leading a journey into the STEP curriculum of sorts. He'll be exploring how our past can inform our present and our future. And I'm sure that's something many of us have thought about over the years. And then on Tuesday, Parviz, again, not me, will continue to keep us moving and gaining strength with her chair and standing exercises. And then on Thursday, we have the social circle at 11 a.m. And then the popular Talking Hands course, which is all on the British Sign Language and taught by Farah and Zara, will also continue. And that brings us on to next Saturday, when we'll hear our next sing-along Saturday on social media showcasing musical talent from across our Jamaat. And that will be followed by our next Jamaati evening programme right here at 7 p.m. So details of all of these events and much more can be found in our favourite Al-Saha, on our social media pages, the II UK app, or on the.ismaili.com/UK. And this evening, we also have another great programme for you all. So tonight, we'll be hearing from our local council president of Germany, Alija Sahi Akhundzada, and our local council president of Sweden, Huzur Mukiani Shabnam Darsani. We'll then hear an inspiring ITREB talk by Alwaez Faisal Ali, which will all be about exploring faith and well-being, which is incredibly topical for now. And all of this will be topped off by a beautiful musical concert. So we hope you enjoy tonight's programme, and we look forward to seeing you again next Saturday night, right here. So take care until then, and Ya Ali Madad.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My dear brothers and sisters, Ya Ali Madad. It is my pleasure to address the Jamaat tonight. A lot has happened since the last time I had the opportunity to address you this way. In the countries of our jurisdiction, which are Sweden, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and Finland, we saw a decrease in COVID cases, and many aspects of normal life became available again. Unfortunately, the infection rate has increased significantly around Europe, and governments have imposed new restrictions again to slow the spread of the virus. I urge each of you to please take your country guidelines seriously and do your best to be a part of the solution and help to decrease the spread of COVID-19. It is still our individual responsibility to ensure our safety and the safety of others. The Council for Sweden has managed to grow and achieve many milestones this year, even though our inaugural year occurred in the most unusual of circumstances. It has been the priority of our Council to not only provide meaningful resources to the Jamaat, but also provide means to keep us unified even though we cannot physically connect in the Jamaat Khana space. Recently, the Council for Sweden has identified priorities that we hope to achieve in 2021. Specifically, we want to continue to foster the idea of one Jamaat by continuing to provide programs that bring us together, where we can celebrate our diversity and pluralism. Second, we want to focus on the settlement of our newly arrived Murids in Europe. There is a lot of progress to be made in helping newly arrived Murids have access to Jamaat Khanas and gathering spaces, finding new employment opportunities and suitable housing, integrating in the new cities of residence, and generally helping to improve quality of life. Finally, the Council of Sweden would like to see more Jamaat engagement amongst all age groups in 2021. We will work on creating new and existing programs that will engage and benefit all members of our Jamaat, including new and settled Murids. Despite the unusual year, Youth and Sports Board successfully launched virtual European Youth Camp and Mosaic camps for the youths. The Education Board launched virtual classes. Economic Planning Board launched a program to help Murids start their own businesses. The Health Board hosted our first ever health camp. We launched European Al-Saha in English, Farsi and Arabic, and Betul Ilm organized and hosted virtual classes since April. The Jamaat also continues to receive individual help through casework with our experienced team of case managers who are always available should you need any assistance. In the coming days, we will need to spend more time at home. I encourage the Jamaat to dial in and join a new activity or a program hosted by either local or national council. You may be surprised yourself and find a new hobby or learn something new. I know the coming days will be challenging, but let's take advantage of our numerous resources and maintain a positive attitude. Maulana Hazir Imam said in an interview with Professor Diana Eck of Harvard University in November 2015. The moment the people of any generation, of any age lose hope, it is a very, very damaging thing for the community and for that society. So creating circumstances of hope is to me very, very important indeed. Let's keep these words in mind and we prepare to tackle the second wave and remember to be hopeful. As always, the Mukhi Kamariyas and the institutions are here to help the Jamaat. Please do not hesitate to contact us should you require any assistance. During this time, when individuals cannot meet physically, I would like to appeal to the Jamaat to connect anyone you know who may be living alone. Please keep in contact and remain united at this time. On behalf of all the Jamaati leadership, I pray for our safety and pray for the well-being of all, both locally and across the world. Ameen. Thank you and Ya Ali Madad.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. My dear sisters and brothers, Ya Ali Madad. It gives me great pleasure to connect with you all again through this medium. I hope you and families are keeping well, and I pray for your good health. I would like to give a short message in English first before I continue in German language. The months from March have been some of the most challenging times for all of us. Despite the distances, the Jamaat in Germany, Austria and Poland supported and stood for each other in these times. Through a COVID support task force, our Mukhi, Kamadia, Mukiani, Kamadiani Saiban and more than 100 volunteers, the Council for Germany has been able to provide a quick and effective response to help the Jamaat. Our teams have also delivered online programs in German, Farsi and Arabic to help the Jamaat stay connected. When the local condition and regulation allow us, our teams are also ready to implement Jamaat Khana reopening plans that follow best practice to ensure the health and safety of the Jamaat. The German Council, together with National Council, are also continuing the work for the Jamaati in the key priority areas of resettlement support, Jamaati engagement, and local capacity building. We are thankful to our sisters and brothers in the UK and the Swedish Council for the collaboration and support in this work. We pray for your good health and well-being. Es ist fast 8 Monate her, dass Covid-19-Pandemie in unser Leben eingriff. Keiner von uns wusste im März, wie lange und wie sehr diese Pandemie uns alle beeinträchtigen würde und wie wir in Verbindung bleiben würden. Daraufhin richtete der Deutsche Council ein Covid-Einsatzteam zur Unterstützung der Jamaat ein. Es wurde eine mehrsprachige Telefonzentrale in Deutschland, Österreich und Polen eingerichtet, die täglich Anrufe und die Anfragen der Jamaat beantwortet. Die Gremien der Institution haben Murids, die soziale, gesundheitliche und wirtschaftliche Unterstützung benötigten, rechtzeitig Hilfe geleistet. Unser Team von Muki, Kamadia, Mukiani, Kamadiani Saiban hat die Aufgabe übernommen, die Mitglieder unserer Jamaat anzurufen und sich um ihr Wohlergehen kümmern. Mehr als 100 Freiwillige haben diese Arbeit unterstützt. Um die Verbindung zu unserer Jamaat aufrechtzuerhalten, hat unser Kommunikationsteam hart daran gearbeitet, die deutsche Ausgabe der wöchentlichen Bekanntmachung Al-Saha und andere zeitnahe Mitteilungen in mehreren Sprachen herauszubringen. All diese Schritte wären ohne den entschlossenen Einsatz und der harte Arbeit unserer Freiwilligen aus der Jamaat nicht möglich gewesen, die ihre Zeit und ihre Ressourcen in diesen schwierigen Situationen zur Verfügung stellen, um die Jamaat zu dienen. Ich stehe mit Hochachtung vor der großartigen Arbeit unserer lokalen Vertreter und alle Freiwilligen, welche die Mitglieder der Jamaat rund um die Uhr tatkräftig unterstützten. Von Seiten der Jamaat gilt ihnen unsere tiefe Dankbarkeit für die geleisteten wertvollen Dienste. Ich bete, dass Sie alle dafür vielfach belohnt werden. Der Council hat auch Umsetzungspläne für die Wiedereröffnung der Jamaat Khanas auf der Grundlage strenger Gesundheits- und Sicherheitsmaßnahmen ausgearbeitet. Wie wir alle wissen, sind die Infektionsraten in Deutschland, Österreich und Polen in den letzten Zeiten wieder angestiegen. Deshalb haben wir diese Pläne zwar fertiggestellt, aber wir mussten die Durchführung vorerst zurückstellen. Wenn die Gesundheitssituation sich wieder verbessert hat, werden wir die Wiedereröffnungspläne umsetzen und die Jamaat wird rechtzeitig davon erfahren. Ich danke allen Freiwilligen, die diese Arbeit zur Wiedereröffnung der Jamaat Khana unterstützten, für ihre Dienste und Ressourcen. Der Deutsche Council wird auch im Jahr 2021 in Deutschland, Österreich und Polen der Jamaat dienen. Eine wichtige Priorität ist dabei die Unterstützung der Murids bei ihrer Ansiedlung und die Gewährleistung eines guten Beschäftigungs- und Bildungsniveaus. Der Council und die Institution leisten individuelle Unterstützung für Murids in Not. Es sollen weitere Versammlungsorte geschaffen werden, damit die Mitglieder der Jamaat in Verbindung bleiben und Unterstützung erhalten können. Es wurden auch lokale Ausschüsse eingesetzt, die mit dem Council zusammenarbeiten, um unsere Kapazitäten vor Ort für den Dienst in der Jamaat aufzubauen. Da unsere Jamaat über das ganze Land verteilt ist, ist viel Arbeit auf die Weitergabe von Informationen im elektronischen IAUK-System der Jamaat ausgerichtet. Damit wir Ihnen besser dienen können, möchte ich Sie darum bitten, Ihre persönlichen Daten im IAUK-System auf den neuesten Stand zu bringen. Wenn Sie dabei Unterstützung benötigen, können Sie auch die Jamaati-Telefonzentrale anrufen. Während wir darauf warten, dass unsere Jamaat-Khanas hoffentlich bald wieder geöffnet werden, möchte ich alle einladen und ermutigen, an den virtuellen Veranstaltungen teilzunehmen, die unsere Teams auf Ismaili TV und über Webinare anbieten. Sie arbeiten hart daran, die Sprachbarrieren zu überwinden und in diesen Zeiten die Verbindung unter uns aufrechtzuerhalten. Ohne Freiwillige wäre nur sehr wenig von dieser Arbeit möglich gewesen. Wenn auch Sie einen freiwilligen Beitrag zur Arbeit der Jamaat in Deutschland, Österreich oder Polen leisten möchten, fühlen Sie sich bitte eingeladen, sich zu melden und mit uns in Kontakt aufzutreten. Ihre Unterstützung wird für unsere Jamaat von großem Wert sein. Tagtäglich wird von Wissenschaftlern auf der ganzen Welt an einem Coronavirus-Impfstoff gearbeitet, welcher dazu beitragen wird, die Herausforderungen zu überwinden, denen wir in den letzten Monaten im Zusammenhang mit dieser Pandemie ins Auge sahen. Ich möchte an die globalen Botschaft des Maulana Hazar-Imam von März diesen Jahres erinnern, in der er uns bat, stark zu bleiben und uns darauf vorzubereiten, für unsere Zukunft zu bauen, wenn diese Krise vorüber ist. Im Namen der Jamaat möchte ich dem Maulana Hazar-Imam unseren bescheidenen Shukrana für seinen anhaltenden Segen, seine Wegweisung und Unterstützung in diesen schwierigen Zeiten aussprechen. Gemeinsam und miteinander im Einklang werden wir diese Krise als eine starke und geeintes Jamaat überwinden. Ich wünsche allen die beste Gesundheit. Ich danke Ihnen und sage Ja Ali Madad.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The Bank of England has forecasted that unemployment in the UK is expected to almost double since the COVID outbreak, reaching 7.5% by the end of the year. According to the Office of National Statistics, the number of adults in the UK experiencing some sort of depression during the pandemic has almost doubled from before the outbreak, 42% of whom have said that their relationships have been affected, and 85% of whom have stated that feeling stressed or anxious has been the most common way their well-being has been affected. But it's not all doom and gloom. Our faith teaches us to count our blessings, whatever the situation. And COVID, for many, has allowed us to re-evaluate our lives, to focus on the simple pleasures of life, spending more time at home with our loved ones, reducing our expenditure, and of course, the benefits to the environment with less traffic and pollution. But we must also acknowledge that it hasn't been easy for many and continues to come with great sacrifice. And so as a community, how do we cope with these issues? One way, I think, is by seeking inspiration from our faith, from the example of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and from his experiences. Surah Ad-Dua in the Holy Quran, which is considered a Meccan surah, according to several narrations, was revealed after a brief interval, during which time the Prophet is understood to have not received any revelation from Allah. And during this period, according to some early Muslim scholars, he was reported to have been taunted by others, who told him that his Lord had forsaken him and was displeased with him, adding that if he had been right about his divine mission, then surely revelation would not have ceased for him. According to several sources, it was a period of great uncertainty and anxiety for the Prophet. And in this state of worry and fear, the following surah was revealed to him.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث.
Now, there are many lessons one can take from this revelation. First and foremost, the conviction that Allah is always with us, regardless of whatever we're going through. And it is His promise that the future, be it in this life or in the hereafter, will be better than the past. That can become a source of hope and comfort for us. Secondly, that we must never forget the blessings of Allah, even during our darkest times. The Prophet too had his fair share of struggles, but Allah reminds him of His blessings, and that it is through Allah's will that the Prophet was shown the way, just as we too can be, by trusting in His infinite mercy and remaining steadfast on His guidance, one of which most certainly is caring for others, in the same way that we too have been cared for through Allah's mercy. And finally, that anxiety, worry, fear, despair, these are all very real emotions. They're emotions that even our Prophet was thought to have experienced during his lifetime. They are part of our human condition and ultimately contribute towards how we think, how we feel, and our entire well-being.
How we think, act, and feel, how we manage stress, relate to others, and make decisions are all affected by what we call our mental health or well-being. Mental health is just as important as physical health, and in fact, in particular specialties like mine, mental and physical health are closely linked. Mental health affects everybody, and so no one should feel uncomfortable talking about it, nor should any mental health problem be associated with any stigma. We all have times when we feel sad, worried, stressed, or frightened. During difficult times like the current COVID-19 pandemic, all of us are likely to, at least at some point, have been troubled by feelings of worry about our own health and the health of our families, personal finances and the global economy, and about when we are likely to be able to reunite with family, friends, and our Jamaat in a near-normal fashion. During this time, studies have shown that over a third of people are showing signs of anxiety, depression, or both. 2/3 of people are feeling stressed, and only 50% of people are willing to talk about this. During times of multifactorial concerns like this, feelings of isolation, anxiety, and uncertainty are common. Staying connected with others, reaching out, giving back, and being kind, learning a new skill, maintaining an active lifestyle, and trying to be in the present, as well, of course, as remaining staunch in our faith and engaging in prayer and ibadat, are just some of the ways we can improve our mental health and stay hopeful and strong during these challenging times.
You see, COVID-19 and its associated economic and social effects have had a huge impact on our Jamaat's mental health and well-being, and those amongst whom we live. And as we've just heard, anyone can be affected by mental health issues at any point in their lives. Whilst some of us may not consider, for example, anxiousness over losing one's job and how one will now put food on the table, or grief over the bereavement of a loved one, or fear of being socially isolated from friends and family as issues of mental health, they most certainly can be. If these emotions and feelings are left to become a continuous, static, overwhelming part of life. If we take the simple analogy of holding a glass of water, for a few seconds, that exercise won't be a problem. For a few minutes, you might still be okay. But if you're asked to constantly hold that glass of water in the same position for hours, days, weeks, months on end, that same exercise can actually become quite unbearable. And so what can we do in such situations? Firstly, acknowledging how we feel and identifying whether there is an issue by speaking to others. And whilst belief in Allah's infinite grace and mercy, His constant protection and guidance through a present and living Imam who is always with us can be a great source of comfort, hope and reassurance. As Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam once said, and I quote, "Society can give a man space to breathe and freedom to move in it. It can afford him the means of keeping himself healthy and making himself strong. But happiness never depends on one's surroundings. It depends altogether and exclusively on one's self." Unquote. I suspect what the Imam is alluding to here is the importance of one's own action, of taking responsibility over one's own destiny, albeit by seeking out advice and support wherever and whenever needed, without any sense of embarrassment. And for those whom we love and care about, encouraging them to also take that first step by being that support system for them. In addition to which, as we know, there is so much support within our Jamaat, through our Mukhi Kamriya Saiban, through our institutions who are there for our benefit, for our well-being. One such example is the Healthy Minds team.
The Healthy Minds team is part of the UK jurisdiction Aga Khan Health Board. Our mandate is to increase awareness and understanding of mental health conditions and thereby improve the Jamaat's mental well-being and access to appropriate support and treatment where needed. We are a team of multidisciplinary experts observing the highest standards of professionalism at all times. We continue to support and work with all members of the Jamaat, whether they are parents with worries about their child's learning and development, new mothers experiencing symptoms of postnatal depression, people who have suffered a bereavement and struggling to cope, families concerned about an elderly relative showing signs of dementia, teenagers struggling with the different stresses of adolescence, university students experiencing anxiety, and Jamaati members of all ages struggling with loneliness, isolation, and the economic impacts of the pandemic, including job losses and financial strain. We also offer awareness sessions, training, and deliver fortnightly live mindfulness webinars for the Jamaat to help people manage their stress and anxiety during the pandemic. The best way to contact us by telephone or email. Our details are in the IR UK directory.
You see, ours is a community of faith, and by assisting each other through the preservation of sound mind, which is among the foundational principles of Islam's ethical code, by seeking out the support we may need, we are living our faith. In addition to which, we must never underestimate the power of prayer, particularly during times of distress or worry. In a letter attributed to Hazrat Ali alayhi salam, which is said to have been written to Hazrat Hassan alayhi salam, the Imam explained to his son what one should ask for in prayer and how Allah answers these requests. He said, "He accepts your prayer whenever you pray to him. Invoke him to grant you your heart's desire. Lay before him the secrets of your heart. Tell him about all the calamities that have befallen you and misfortunes which face you, and beseech his help to overcome them. You may invoke his help and support in difficulties and distresses. You may implore him to grant you long life and sound health. You may pray to him for prosperity, and you may request him for such favors and grants that none but he can bestow and award. Sometimes the prayers are delayed because the merciful Lord wants you to receive further rewards for patiently bearing calamities and sufferings, and still believing sincerely in his help. Thus, you may be awarded better favors than you requested for. Sometimes your prayers are turned down, and this is also in your interest, because you often unknowingly ask for things that are really harmful to you. If your requests are granted, they will do you more harm than good. Thus, the refusal to accede to your solicitations is a blessing in disguise to you. But very often, your requests, if they are not really harmful to you in this life or in the hereafter, may be delayed, but they are granted in quantities much more than you had asked for, bringing in more blessings in their wake than you could ever imagine. And so, whilst we all have a responsibility to care for our well-being in every sense of the word, and the well-being of each other, our faith also reminds us of the importance of sabr, patience, and the unshakable belief that Allah will always do for us what is in our best interest. We just need to have trust in his infinite grace and mercy. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. President Yaqut Hashim of the Ismaili National Council for the United Kingdom, Madam Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor, Your Excellencies, my Lords, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to tonight's performance of Misaq-e-Ishq, the Covenant of Love, in collaboration with the Aga Khan Museum, the Harvard Club of the United Kingdom, and the Ismaili Centre London. I am pleased to invite the President of the National Council for the United Kingdom, Yaqut Hashim, to make some opening remarks.
Good evening. Thank you very much indeed. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you to this unique building, the Ismaili Centre. The partnership at today's performance brings together the Ismaili Centre collaboration with the Aga Khan Museum and the Harvard Club. Almost every arts initiative we engage in makes us appreciate what an important part Muslim civilizations have played in our shared history. Reciprocal expressions of love devotion, and gratitude are found in Ismaili poetry throughout history and across borders. One such example is the Ginan Abe Tari Mohabbat Telagi Mera Sahib, attributed to Pir Shams, which I believe is being recited this evening. Briefly translated, for your face I am all athirst, my Lord. Grant me the gift of your sight, now that I am in love with you, my Lord. When the face was seen, there was joy at heart. Pir Shams told the tale. Now I am in love with you, my Lord. My heart is stricken now with love for you. This bond of love has inspired members of the Ismaili community over generations to selflessly serve towards the betterment of humanity, including offering of their time and intellect support. So what better way to celebrate His Highness's vision than with today's performance, the Covenant of Love, which promises to be a uniquely beautiful performance brought to us by Professor Ali Ehsani, singer Ali Sethi, Grammy winner producer Nohar Jodson, and amongst other talented musicians. Ali Ehsani is professor of Indo-Muslim and Islamic religion and culture at Harvard. He is particularly interested in the relationship between religion, literature, and the arts in Muslim societies, and the role of arts as a pedagogic bridge between civilizations. A recipient of the Harvard Foundation Medal for his efforts to improve intercultural and racial relations, he has also been awarded the Petra C. Schutek Prize for Distinguished Teaching. Ali, thank you very much for reaching out to us with this concert. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and have a wonderful evening, and may I present to you Ali Ehsani. Thank you.
What is the nature of love? Human and divine. For more than a millennium, Muslim poets, such as the world-renowned Rumi, have expressed a theology of love that has shaped the faith of Muslims around the world. In particular, these poets extol the transformative powers of Ishq, a multifaceted term interpreted over the centuries as passion, devotion, ardor, commitment, longing, or yearning. For these poets, Ishq, or love, is a primordial link that connects the divine to all of creation. Tasting or experiencing the nectar of this love, they believe, is the central purpose of worldly existence. In Misaq-e-Ishq, the Covenant of Love, we wish to explore the social and literary context of 9 iconic poetic texts from South Asia, beginning with the 13th, 14th century legend Amir Khusro, and concluding with the Pakistani poet Ahmad Faraz, who died in 2008. We came up with a chamber of poetic voices, each employing and expanding the metaphor of love in the service of now sacred and now secular ideals. Their poetry, spanning 1,000 years, responds to the exigencies of their eras with an idiom that trumps orthodoxy and dissolves binaries. The performance will also show how this centuries-old poetic tradition, deeply rooted in traditions of South Asian Muslim spirituality, today has come to serve as a kind of food for the soul, ruh ki ghaza, as it's said in Urdu, for those who thirst for a traditionary discourse that reconciles their religion with contemporary requirements of pluralism, tolerance, and individual and collective notions of selfhood. This ancient poetic tradition invites audiences today to understand and experience the human and the divine through the all-encompassing lens of love. While engaging with it, we wondered if it's possible to feel God's presence in this world. Is vulnerability a strength or a weakness? Should you listen to your heart or abide by the constraints of social norms? In the course of our endeavor, we often found ourselves listening to a stunning conversation between many linguistic, intellectual, and musical cultures, a template for the harmonious coexistence of multiple narratives if there ever was one. And we hope that you will hear and experience it with us today. Ajmer Sharif in Rajasthan ranks amongst the most important places of pilgrimage in South Asia. For many centuries, millions of peoples of all faiths and socio-economic classes traveled to the city to pay their respects to Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, a Sufi master who was buried there in 1236. Some Muslims from the region have considered pilgrimage to this shrine as equivalent to going to Mecca. Over the centuries, an impressive list of dignitaries have visited this sacred place to pay their respects. Given its tremendous historical and spiritual significance, a couple of years ago, I accompanied a group of alumni from Harvard's Business School to the shrine. As we entered, we were met by Sayyid Salman Chishti, one of the Dargah's custodians. After a brief introduction, he led us to the center of the shrine, the tomb of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, to pay our respects by laying a chadar, it's a long, large embroidered cloth, and offer garlands of roses. The crowded room was filled with sweet fragrances of rose petals, and jasmine and incense, while someone was going around sprinkling rose water on the pilgrims who were offering prayers and supplications. In the background, one could hear the rhythmic singing of qawwali, the genre of devotional music associated with Sufi shrines in South Asia. As we reached the tomb, our host instructed us to hold the chadar by its edges and raise it above our heads so that we were underneath its canopy. He then began reciting prayers in Arabic and Urdu. Standing next to him, I closed my eyes, focusing on the prayers, the scents, the sounds, and the whole atmosphere. Suddenly, Sayyid Salman whispered in my ear, "Look, Professor, they're weeping." I opened my eyes and I looked at my companions. Indeed, they were all come with emotion. After laying the chadar on the tomb, we walked out into the dazzling sunlight. Surprisingly, the group was strangely silent. No one said a word about what they had just experienced. The next day, however, a member of our group remarked to me, "We have a marketing problem." And quizzically I asked him, "A marketing problem?" He said, "If this is Islam as it is practiced by millions of people, how is it that I don't know about this? How is it that I don't know about Muinuddin Chishti? How is it that I don't know about the faith of common, ordinary Muslims?" Who was Muinuddin Chishti? And how did he, quote unquote, market Islam in the Indian subcontinent? Through love, poetry, and music. Born in Chist, Afghanistan, Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti received a solid education in Islamic thought, particularly mysticism. According to tradition, he came to South Asia as a result of a command he received in a dream from the Prophet Muhammad, eventually settling in Ajmer. Here he reached out to peoples of all faiths, especially the poor and the needy. He is famed for his declaration that the highest form of devotion in Islam is to redress the misery of those in distress, to fulfill the needs of the helpless, and to feed the hungry. He's often called Khwaja Garib Nawaz, the patron of the poor, and Ali will later on give you another meaning of this. Not surprisingly, today, feeding and looking after the poor and the sick, regardless of faith, is one of the central missions of the Dargah, which is guided by the principle that one can only love God through loving humanity and all of God's creation. Amongst the most famous historical personalities to reach out for assistance to the Chishti saint was the Mughal Emperor Akbar, whose wife Joda was unable to conceive an heir. Akbar sought the blessings of Sheikh Salim Chishti, a descendant of Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti. After the birth of his son, whom he named Salim, after the holy man who predicted his birth, a grateful emperor made 14 pilgrimages to Ajmer, many of them on foot. He donated a giant cooking pot, still used to this day, to prepare food to feed the poor every day. The other important feature of Chishti practice that attracted millions to the shrine is the emphasis on singing poetry and listening to music as forms of worship, and an important means by which a person can transcend the material and connect, if only momentarily, with the spiritual. Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti and his successors were great supporters of these arts as integral to the religious experience, and became the most significant patrons of the Qawwali, the genre of Sufi music characteristic of South Asia. Let us now listen to a famous contemporary Qawwali dedicated to Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti.
Good evening, welcome. Thank you all for being here. Would like to begin by thanking the Ismaili Center for having us here. We were in Manchester last night where we performed the same set. And I was saying to Professor Asani, we were on a train today, Noah, Professor Asani. These wonderful musicians from Lahore, Ustad Faisal Abbas on tabla, Shahzad Ali on harmonium, Anthony Soshil on keys. We were talking about how various people afterwards came up to us and said, so interesting, you know, I had this experience and today I was reminded of my experience, you know, of being a Muslim or of, you know, thinking about Muslims and thinking about Muslimness, and everybody had their own story. And I was saying to Professor Asani, well, you know, this is what we're doing. It's a form of tabligh, you know. We are a kind of new version of Tablighi Jamaat or something. We should rename our project. The beautiful thing about this kind of what we call mahal in Urdu, this kind of mobile community of ideas, you know, and feelings, is that once the conversation starts, you know, there are links within links within links sprouting everywhere, and you kind of feel yourself suddenly in the midst of this kind of this beautiful whirlwind of ideas where one thing leads to another and it sort of never ends. It's my way of saying that when Professor Asani mentioned yesterday on stage that Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti is popularly referred to as a Gharib Nawaz, right? The word Gharib in there, protector of the poor or helper of the poor or messiah of the poor, the word Gharib has come to mean poor in a very literal, narrow sort of sense in present-day South Asia. When we say, you know, Ghurbat or Gharibi Hatao, we mean end poverty. Let's be socialists. But my teacher, my singing teacher, the great Ustad Nasiruddin Sami, recently pointed out to me, he said, well, you know, the original meaning of the word Gharib is he or she who is out of place, right? So he or she who feels that they are exiled or that they are different or that they have to struggle. Anybody who is undergoing some form of distress, anybody who is afflicted. So, you know, that kind of corresponds to a wide variety of experiences which makes the title Gharib Nawaz all the more profound and interesting. This qawwali, contemporary qawwali from the movie Jodha Akbar, was composed by A.R. Rahman, who himself is very influenced. India's, South Asia's greatest living music composer, very influenced by the ideas and teachings of Moinuddin Chishti. And what I find very interesting and powerful about this qawwali is that it kind of exalts the human, right, as a passage, as a kind of way to kind of sense the divine. So there's a part in it where you say, "Tu hai Hindal Wali Khaja." You are the how would you translate it, Professor Asani? I just want to make sure. Major saint of Hind, of the subcontinent, and that through you I am able to feel the Prophet Muhammad, right? Mustafa ko paya, that having experienced your love, having sought your blessing, having strived for your abode, I am beginning to get a sense of what the teachings of the Prophet were like, or would have been like.
Khaja ji, Khaja mere Khaja, dil mein sama jao, shaho ka shatu, Ali ka dulana. Khaja mere Khaja, dil mein sama jao, shaho ka shatu, Ali ka dulana. Khaja mere Khaja, dil mein sama jao, Khaja mere Khaja, dil mein sama jao, bekasson ki takdeer tumhe saware, oh bekasson ki takdeer tumhe saware. तेरे दरबार में ओ ख्वाजा नूर को है देखा, तेरे दरबार में ओ ख्वाजा नूर को है देखा, तू है हिंदल वली ख्वाजा, रुतबा है प्यारा, जाने से तुमको ख्वाजा मुस्तफा को पाया। Khaja mere Khaja, dil mein sama jao, shaho ka shatu, Ali ka dulana.
So, this evening is about connections, all kinds of connections. And sometimes people wonder, why am I, a professor, hanging around with artists and going around and performing? What is this craziness? How can the two come together? Well, actually, the arts, the sound arts, the visual arts, and the literary arts are forms of knowledge. For centuries, knowledge in the Muslim world has been transmitted to the arts. So think about before print culture and before books and before schools, and how did ordinary people learn about their faith? They learned it through the arts. They experienced it. And the interesting thing about this poetry is that it fuses the aesthetic with the theological, the philosophical, the ethical, and so it's what I would call heart-mind knowledge. It's appealing, it's intellectual and emotive at the same time. And this is how Islam and ideas have spread to many, many parts of the Muslim world. So talking about another connection, so people say, how did I meet Ali Sethi? Well, actually, Ali Sethi came to meet me. He came to Harvard many years ago as an undergraduate, and in his very first year, he took a course with me. And that course, according to his mother, turned his world upside down. And so we had this, so since then, over the really decades now, we have developed a continuing relationship. And sometimes when he's performing, he'll ask me like one of the ghazals, or what should I sing? I'll pick things for him, and so on. And this idea of having a partnership between the academy and the arts, and having two different institutions of knowledge and learning collaborating, I think is a very powerful, it's a very powerful setup. So, you want to say something?
Yes, I want to say something. I want to say that you say that, the course turned my world upside down. I said yesterday, and now I'm going to say it for the rest of my days, it turned my world downside up, I should say. I went to America in September 2002, exactly 1 year after 9/11. And though I came from, a sort of family of publishers, journalists, media people, I had sort of traveled to Western countries. I grew up speaking English along with Urdu and Punjabi, Despite all my privileges, my exposure, my access to a kind of cosmopolitan, environment, I still felt this kind of the anxiety of being Muslim or coming from a Muslim place when I was in America. Don't forget, this is before YouTube, and this is before Facebook, which was created by my classmate at Harvard. As my friends and relatives keep saying, why didn't you buy shares? Everywhere I went, there was a kind of, anxiety about Islam and about Muslims. Let us not forget, this is just as, Bush and Cheney were about to launch their war on Iraq, and the op-eds of otherwise liberal-seeming newspapers were full of these very sophisticated justifications for why, the Muslim world needed democracy, which was another way of saying the Muslim world needs us, needs our ideas, the Enlightenment has to go to these places, all the rest of it. And I felt this very kind of acute desire to kind of play qawwalis to people, or to kind of, sort of recite some of the sort of, religious folklore that was very beautiful and charming and appealing that I had heard from my grandmothers, or I wanted to tell them about, the sort of mystical sayings of a Sufi saint who was buried not far from where I lived, but I didn't feel entitled to any of that. I didn't feel that that counted as Islam. I didn't feel that any of that counted as, in other words, the experience of Muslims, the stuff that makes Muslims Muslims, the stuff that, has given Muslims the equipment for living their lives, didn't count. So what counted? Well, it was in the kinds of questions that one was asked every day, which was, well, what does the Quran say about women? And now, of course, we kind of sniff at these questions because we've had such an elaborate discourse around them in media and the academy, etc. And young Muslims today in Britain, in America, in France, a lot of them are equipped with, answers for these things. But at that time, it didn't feel that way. Even in a place like Harvard, it didn't feel that way. So anyway, I enrolled in this course, Understanding Islam and Contemporary Muslim Societies, my first year. And I simultaneously felt very at home and also astounded by the approach that Professor Asani and his course were advocating, which was an aesthetic approach to understanding Islam and Muslim societies. So instead of beginning your course with, well, what is Sharia law, right, which in itself is a very actually complex question, you began the course with, what is a qawwali? What is a calligraphy? What is, this novel, The Wedding of Zain, that you have to read? Where does it come from? What is Somali literature? What is, Bangladeshi contemporary feminist poetry? So these disorienting, but actually very helpful. So when you say, turn my world upside down, I say, turn my world downside up, because I began to feel that these were also legitimate ways, that analyzing rigorously and then entering via craft, the world of craft, these disciplines, these bodies of knowledge, these worlds of art making that were very, very rich and very, very ancient, was also a legitimate pursuit. And it was not just something that belonged in the realm of, hobby, or, as we say, dil behlana in Urdu, sort of just making yourself happy when you're sad or whatever, or making other people, or being charming. These are legitimate tools for living.
TK? All right. Okay, good. All right. So I have to give space for him to, because it's been very interesting to have this collaboration with him over the decades. And this particular, yes, decade. Decade, okay. Okay. Anyway, so now this connection, the next connection I want to introduce to you is Amir Khusro, historian, poet, and musician, died in 1326. Khusro lived at a time when several dynasties of Central Asian or Turkic origin had established kingdoms in the northern regions of the subcontinent. Since they used Persian as a language of administration and culture, South Asia didn't exist as an entity. South Asia was actually part of the Persianate world. There was no South Asia. It was a Persianate world which stretched from Bengal all the way to what is now Turkey. This was all one world, the Persianate world. One transcultural unit where the elites all spoke Persian and the local people spoke different languages. As an early cosmopolitan, Amir Khusro, through his Persian poetry, identified on the one hand with his larger Persian literary world, while through his Hindu compositions, he showed affiliation with his local world. Famously called Tuti-e-Hind, the parrot of India, on account of his eloquence, he synthesized multiple strands of his identity. To Khusro are attributed various cross-cultural pollinations in language, poetry, music. The sitar, for example, is said to be an invention of his. The qawwali. Khusro was a devoted disciple of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, a descendant of Muinuddin Chishti, and he's buried next to the tomb of his renowned teacher in Delhi. Through his teacher, he learned something very important. He learned about a covenant, a pact that connects all of creation to God. This covenant is referred to in the Quranic verse 7:171, in which God says, God asks the uncreated creation the question, Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Lord? And the uncreated creation comes into existence, or some poets said jumped into existence, by responding, Bala Shahidna, yes, we witness it. This covenant, which forms the fundamental basis of traditions of spirituality in Islam, is interpreted as a pact or an agreement of love that binds God with all of creation, hence the term Misaq-e-Ishq, the covenant of love. It is represented as the moment of pure perfection. It is returning to the state of union with the beloved that all souls that have been separated through the process of creation long for. In this Persian poem, Amir Khusro transforms the covenant of love into a poetic metaphor, representing this occasion as a celebration where everyone is dancing happily, joyously, ecstatically. Why ecstatically? Because they are one with God. They're in God's presence. And intoxicated from the happiness of being in the presence of the divine beloved. And in this poem, he uses last night as a metaphor for the primordial yesterday. So the Persian of this goes, Namidanam chi manzil bud, shab jai man budam, par harsu rakse bismil bud, shab jai ke man budam. Khuda khud mere majlis bud, andar la makan khusro, Muhammad sham mehfil bud, shab jai ke man budam. I wonder what was the place where I was last night. All around me was the dance of ecstasy. O Khusro, God himself was presiding over this gathering that took place beyond reality, beyond time and beyond space. La Makan, where the Prophet Muhammad was the central light and the candle of this assembly. In these verses, Khusro represents love as the very essence of God, the master of ceremonies. It is a force that emanates from him and permeates the entire universe. Every atom not only contains this love, but is also a symbolic manifestation of it. Interestingly, this conception of God as love eventually led to a reformulation in some circles of the first phrase of the Muslim creed of faith, from the conventional there is no God but God, La ilaha illallah, to there is no God but love, La ilaha illal-ishq, because if God is love, we can use the term ishq. The Prophet Muhammad, the bearer of divine revelation, was envisioned as the brilliantly illuminating candle or light, delivering the message of love to humanity. And what is interesting in this imagery is that it's using the imagery of an assembly, of a mehfil where poetry is being recited. And the poet who is reciting, whose turn it is to recite, has a candle in front of him. So you can imagine here's this divine assembly presided by God, and here's the Prophet Muhammad is the poet who's reciting. We wonder what he's reciting. So with this, we will have a rendition of just a couple of verses of this very famous ghazal, Namidanam.
There are some Persian friends in this assembly tonight, and I beg their forgiveness for my utterly Punjabi pronunciation. Because while we are no longer in the Persian-speaking subcontinent, we are still in the presence of people who know better, so I'm just gonna... my only disclaimer is that this is a tune I learned from a traditional qawwal in Lahore who performed with us the first time we did this set in Lahore 2 years ago now. His name is Kashif. He's a young Qawwal. And we were hunting about for a tune for this poem because Professor Asani said, oh, we can't do this show without Nami Danam because that's where the covenant of love begins and all the links of. And so I said, but I don't, should I compose it? And then Kashif, whose job was just to sit there and clap with us, turned around and said, Mainu yaad hai in Punjabi, which, I know it. And so I said, but what is it like? And he was like, and now you'll hear what it was like. The raga, the melody is Khamaj. Khamaj is a traditional folk melody adapted from the deserts of Rajasthan and Sindh into these more sort of formal recitals.
Nami danam che manzil bu, Nami danam che manzil bu, Shab jaye ki manbudam. Nami danam che manzil bu, Shab jaye ki manbudam. Bahar su raqs nismul bu. Bahar su raqs nismul bu. Shab jaye ki manbudam. Nami danam che manzil bu. Shab jaye ki manbudam.
The clapping affirms what is being said.
Khuda khud mere majlis bod andar la maka khusro. Khuda khud mere majlis bod Khuda khud mere majlis bod andar la maka khusro. Muhammad shamme mahfil bu, Muhammad shamme mahfil bu. Shab jaye ki manbudam. Muhammad shamme mahfil bu. Shab jaye ki manbudam. Nami danam che manzil bu. Shab jaye ki manbudam.
Thank you and apologies.
Right. So for our next piece, we move to Multan in the Punjab, which served as a major hub of spirituality beginning in the 13th and 14th centuries. Among the famous poet saints of the city is Pir Shams. His identity is contested today, some even associating him with Shamset Tabriz, the teacher of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, some associating him with just a Sufi pir, and some traditions asserting that he was a Sayyid sent to the Punjab by the Ismaili Imams in Iran. His teachings are embodied in a corpus of devotional poetry called the Ginans, or hymns of contemplative knowledge, that are still sung by communities in South Asia. In this Ginan, Abba Teri Mohabbat, I'm in love for you, or I'm in love with you, Pir Shams longs to meet the beloved from whom he has been separated, and longs to meet face to face. The mysterious beloved has driven him insane to the point that love has overwhelmed the intellect. He longs for a vision of the divine. Naino se nain milao, let our eyes meet. The term that is sometimes used, he sometimes uses the word didar and sometimes he uses the word darshan. And darshan is particularly interesting, for amongst its many usages is in reference to devotional practices in Hindu temples where seeing is a reciprocal act of worship. One sees and is seen by God. Seeing God is a pervasive theme in the Quran Sharif, whether it is the divine command to humans to perceive the signs of God in nature that surround us, or commands wherever you turn, you see the face of God. Or Prophet Moses' request to God, I wish to see you. Seeing God as a metaphor also refers to the experience of the Prophet Muhammad's ascension or miraj through the heavens and his quote-unquote face-to-face meeting with God. And for Muslim mystics, the Prophet's journey is a paradigm of their own journey to God, during which one is transformed from being self-centered, egotistical, to being God-centric. This transformation is very necessary because in the presence of God, there can be only one ego, and that is God. Here we have a wonderful example of how through the metaphor of seeing, this poetry transcends religious and creedal boundaries. Along with this Ginan of Pir Shams, we will hear a composition in the same rag, the same melody, by the 16th century Punjabi poet Shah Hussain. In this poem, Shah Hussain represents the soul as a woman who is spinning cotton at the spinning wheel. He draws parallels between the act of spinning and the sound of the spinning wheel with zikr, the constant recitation of God's names through which one is transformed. Shah Hussain urges the woman's soul at the spinning wheel to continue spinning, i.e. remembering God, meditating in the early hours of the morning so that she will be ready for her meeting with her Lord. In using the symbol of the woman's soul, Shah Hussain adheres to Indic literary conventions in which the notion of viraha, or yearning experienced by the virahini, or woman separated from a beloved husband, is used to express the longing felt by the human soul for God. Popularized by the famous motif of Krishna and Radha in Bhakti poetry, it represents the soul as a woman longing for suhag, or union with an elusive beloved. And when she meets her beloved, even a loving glance causes transformation. Now, this connection with this Abateri Mobat of Pir Shams and Shah Hussain is an interesting connection, because today, when we think about these figures, we box them into religious ideologies. This is Ismaili, and this is Sufi, and this is Sunni, and so on. But actually, working with Ali, discovered that the rag, the music, the metaphors, the symbols, they're sharing the same language. There are no boundaries. So in the language of the arts and aesthetics, all boundaries have been broken. And people have the freedom to experience. And you can tell them the story of how we discovered this.
I was going to sing this very well-known piece about the spinning wheel, because I'm from Lahore, and Shah Hussain is one of the 4 major patron saints of my city. I, of course, knew about his text. I did not know about Abderi Mohabbad. And we were short on time, and we had to compress everything. And I said, do we have to do the Ginan? And Professor Hassani said, well, if you start cutting, we have to be inclusive. We have to, pay attention and go and listen to the Ginans at least and see. And so I went and heard this Ginan. And lo and behold, it was the same scale. I began to hum it, and it was in the exact same scale, the same raga, the same melodic movements as this other piece by Shah Hussain. it's interesting being a student of music, of traditional music in present-day Pakistan, because while Pakistan officially traces its history back to 1947, which is not so long ago, to when the nation state was created, came into being, the languages of Pakistan, the culture of Pakistan, and the music of Pakistan bear witness to a much, much, much older history, identity, a very fluid, absorptive, cosmopolitan, mixed up, wonderfully mixed up sort of, body of ideas, thoughts that in no other context I can imagine sort of coexisting. As with this rag, which when I was studying it with my teacher, it's called Rag Bhairon, right? Bhairon, and Bhairon is a Hindu deity. And as we were sort of doing the passages, I said to him, it sounds kind of Middle Eastern to me. And he said, but of course, it probably is derived from some Middle Eastern music, but why can't something be both in conversation with or of the Middle East and of South Asia? These are just very modern contemporary divisions. The idea that this is the music of the Arabs and this is the music of the Persians/Iranis and this is the music of Pakistan and that is the music of India. If you think back to about 150 years ago or 200 years ago, artisans, musicians, apothecaries, mystics were constantly traveling between these places and exchanging ideas. So anyway, here are these two pieces that we've kind of welded together for this performance. And a little bit about, you've heard about Pir Shams, and a little bit about Shah Hussain. I was reading up on him. Just as he sort of, exhorts the woman to spin the wheel, Shah Hussain, a lot of his poetry is about weavers, is about people who labor at the spinning wheel, who weave. And the weaver caste has been historically considered one of the lowly castes. It's a sort of lowly work, weaving and spinning. And he kind of transforms this through this poem into an empowering experience. The idea that the labor, the work, the zikr, the getting lost in the repetitions of something is actually liberating and transformative. And that anything, even a chore, can become a passage to self-actuation. And of course, making a woman the protagonist of this experience is, connected to Hindu bhakti traditions, and then sort of via these kinds of poems finds its way into so much Muslim devotional poetry. So here is our little attempt. So this is the rag, right? The way we are made to learn it as students.
Sa-re ga ma pa da ni sa, sa ni da ba ma pa ma ga ma re. साहिब अब तेरी मोहब्बत लगी है जी तेरी रमज़ का तेरी रमज़ का पिया मैं हूँ दीवाना इश्क अक़ल भुलायो मेरे साहिबा अब तेरी मोहब्बत लगी जरा कड़ा घूम जरा कड़ा चरकड़ा बूम चरकड़ा हाँ बूम चरकड़ा चरकड़ा बूम चरकड़ा साइया दा तेरी कत्तन वाली जी कत्तन वाली जी कत्तन वाली जी लड़ियां वतन वाली जी वे बूम चरकड़ा बूम चरकड़ा हाँ बूम चरकड़ा बूम चरकड़ा हाँ बूम चरकड़ा साइया दा तेरी कत्तन वाली जीवे कत्तन वाली जीवे कत्तन वाली हाँ कत्तन वाली जीवे लड़ियां वतन वाली जीवे चरखा बोले ओ चरखा बोले चरखा बोले साईं साईं पैर बोले तू चरखा बोले ओ चरखा बोले साईं साईं पैर बोले तू कहे हुसैन फकीर निमाना कहे हुसैन फकीर निमाना मैं नहीं सब तू चरकड़ा चरकड़ा बूम चरकड़ा हाँ बूम चरकड़ा चरकड़ा बूम चरकड़ा साइया दा तेरी कत्तन वाली जी बुढ़ा होयो शाह हुसैन गंदी चीरा पैया बुढ़ा होयो ओ बुढ़ा हो बुढ़ा होयो शाह हुसैन गंदी चीरा पैया उठ सवेरे ढूंढन ले तू उठ सवेरे ढूंढन ले तू संज दिया जो गईया बूम चरकड़ा बूम चरकड़ा बूम चरकड़ा बूम चरकड़ा साइया दा तेरी कत्तन वाली जी कत्तन वाली जी कत्तन वाली कत्तन वाली जी लड़ियां वतन वाली जी
All right, so for our next poet, we travel to Aurangabad, India, to meet its famous poet, Sayyid Siraj ad-Din Hussain, popularly known as Siraj Aurangabadi. He was born in Aurangabad in 1716 and died there in 1763. Inspired by Hafiz, the renowned master of the Persian ghazal, Siraj composed many exquisite ghazals in Persian and Urdu. During his youthful days, he was devastated when the love of his life, a Hindu soldier, abandoned him. He spent months wandering around, so desperate, so depressed and desolate that people thought he had gone mad. His father, in fact, at one point considered chaining him. Eventually, Siraj found refuge in a Sufi dargah, where under the tutelage of the teacher there, Abdur Rahman Chishti, and the company of fellow disciples, he sought refuge from the fickleness of worldly beloveds by dedicating himself to the real and true beloved, God. He began composing exquisite ghazals, which were sung in Qawwali concerts before large audiences. Eventually, his teacher, his peer, asked him not to compose any more ghazals, apparently because they were detrimental to his spiritual welfare. Maybe he was becoming so famous, and maybe he would develop an ego, and this is not what you want, so no more composition. So from a Sufi perspective, the shift of Siraj's focus from earthly love to divine or spiritual love is not surprising. As poets began articulating their ideas about the nature of love between God and creation, they drew parallels between earthly love, Ishq-e-Majazi, and divine love, Ishq-e-Hakiki. For the former was considered as a necessary prelude to the latter. The soul's longing for God was compared to a person falling deeply and obsessively in love with another human being. They recognized that human romantic love and they recognize that like human romantic love, divine love can be enormously disruptive, personally and socially. Sometimes people think you're crazy. Not surprisingly, passionate relationships between legendary couples, such as the star-crossed lovers, Arabian lovers, Layla Majnun, and Yusuf and Potiphar's wife Zuleika, based on the account in the Quran, and even the 11th century ruler Mahmud of Ghazna and his devoted Ayaz, were shown as examples of perfect human love that could be interpreted in mystical or esoteric ways. And it's not just about romantic love, it's about any type of love. Because any type of love is the most powerful force that can transform an individual. And whether it's love for a mother, for a child, or a friendship, love makes people do things that they otherwise would never do, because they forget themselves and are totally engrossed in the other. So, here are some verses from Siraj's famous ghazal, one that I introduced to Ali a couple of years ago when he came to visit. And, we just spent a couple of days together and we were sharing poetry and things. And I said, how about this one? So here's the verse. Khabar-e tahyur-e-ishq sun, na junoon raha, na pari rahi, na tu raha, na to main raha, jo rahi, so bekhabari rahi. Listen to the confounding story of love, where neither crazed obsession nor charming beauty remain, where neither I remain nor you. All that remains is a state beyond awareness, which Khusro, for example, would call La Makan. In this verse, Siraj alludes to the transforming power of love, as a result of which the ego self, the sense of I-ness, self-consciousness, disappears, duality disappears, and all distinctions are lost. Instead, there is a state beyond rationality, a state which cannot be described, where lover and beloved have become one. Next line. Chali simat-e-ghaib se ek hawa, कि चमन ज़हूर का जल गया, मगर एक शाख है निहाल गम, जिसे दिल कहे सो हरी रही. A sweeping wind came from the invisible world, setting aflame the garden of physical appearances. On the branch of the tree of grief, a single bud, let's call it heart, remained green. This verse can be interpreted in many different ways. One of the interpretations is that the sweeping wind that comes from the spiritual world into the material world is the wind of love, God's love, before which everything is extinguished. So it's like this and everything intransient in the physical world perishes. The only thing that survives is a single bud. And the poet tells us the bud is the human heart. For this is where love of God eternally resides. Nothing can extinguish that. A reference, of course, to the famous saying of the Prophet Muhammad proclaiming, "Heaven and earth could not contain God, but the heart of the believer could." In the third verse, Siraj emphasizes the superiority of love over barren intellectual knowledge as a way of approaching and experiencing the divine beloved, a theme we have already encountered in the Ginan Abateri Mohabbat, Ishq Akal Bulayo. वो अजब घड़ी थी मैं जिस घड़ी लिया दर्स नुस्खाए इश्क का कि किताब अकल की ताक पर जूं धरी थी त्यों ही धरी रही. It was a wondrous moment when I learned a lesson from the treatise of love. Cast aside, the book of the intellect remained unopened on the shelf. Now the melody for this piece is an original melody that's created by Ali, but also Noah. And this is where Noah comes into this partnership. And I will let, Ali and Noah talk about this and how they ended up working. But they've created really a melody that is, here you'll hear Noah just playing it on the guitar. It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And it captures.
Why, thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
I have to begin with that long story, Noah.